All right, now joining the show, we have on the co-host of Allow Me to Be Frank and Sports Illustrated, Pat Ragazzo. Pat, how are you?
I'm great, Andrew. Thanks so much for having me on. Really excited to be here with Barstool athlete and fellow Feltman's business associate as
Yep.
yourself.
I just had so we're taping this on a Wednesday. I just had Feltman's for the first time. We got him last week. Didn't have hot dog buns, so we had to run out and grab them. But yeah, I believe I see all the hype now for him. But awesome company.
Right? Yeah, they're amazing. The I got my care package about a month ago, and
Yep.
they're the best hot dogs I ever had. Like, I don't even want to look at a Nathan's anymore.
I was at a buddy's house over the weekend, and he had Nathan's in the fridge. I was like, you got to get rid of these. Got to throw them out. Can't have these in the house anymore. But so I didn't realize. So when we were down at Feltman's talking, when you guys did the press conference with Frank,
Yeah.
I didn't. They explained how you were a part, like with Sports Illustrated at the time too. So it was funny hearing Pat Ragazzo, Sports Illustrated, asking Frank questions on the podium. So how was that whole press conference for you guys?
Oh, it was a fantastic idea, and Joe, Quinn, and Rob, they came up with the idea of the press conference. Me and Frank went out there on a Friday afternoon in the beginning of June to announce, of course, and Frank was up at the podium in his Feltman shirt, his hot dog hat, and we were all like, me and the Feltman's guys were asking him questions like from the media, and it's funny because I do. In addition to co-hosting with Frank, I have a whole nother side of my career where I'm a reporter for Sports Illustrated covering the Mets beat reporter for Inside the Mets, which is their Sports Illustrated and Fan Nation's New York Mets site, of course. So really for 24/7, I'm a reporter, but then for 1 hour each week, I'm a co-host to the great Frank the Tank.
Yep.
So it was fun kind of collabing those two elements into kind of just asking him questions, and he knocked it out of the park with everything. Not sure if you saw when he knocked all the mustard off the podium.
Oh, it was awesome. It was hilarious.
So on brand with him,
Yes.
with him being the raw dog expert of not liking condiments. That was just like that was a great day, a great experience, and everything. And I'm glad to hear that you've had a similar positive experience working with Feltman so far as well, because they've been great to us.
Yeah, they're the greatest. They just super supportive, super interactive with everybody on social media and just in general. But so like you mentioned, Frank's the raw dog king, like no condiments. Where do you fall in that? Like what do you put on your Feltman's hot dog?
Mustard, the
Just
Feltman's
mustard?
mustard.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you try it?
Yeah, I had it.
Did you?
I had a couple of hot dogs with the Feltman's mustard, and it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, I think that was definitely my. I mean, I'm like a golden guy or Goulden, however you say it.
Mm.
But Feltman's mustard is very good, and I am hearing, I can't say who, but they had mentioned to me that they're trying to expand their mustard to maybe some ballparks in the near future, which I think would be a great idea because I really enjoyed it. Definitely not a raw dog guy like
Yeah.
Frank. I definitely like to have mustard with my hot dog at all times.
So you've got the Allow Me to Be Frank podcast. What was your relationship with Frank, and eventually how did it evolve into doing the podcast with Frank?
Great question. So this is something that I feel like has kind of been untold. So I'm happy to be talking about it now. I found out about Frank like everyone else did. He had the famous rant on the news with about NJ Transit, and he just blew up in, I think it was 2017. And, I had friends who went to Mets games pretty often. I grew up in New Jersey, so, I'd go to maybe one or two a year. But like I had friends who like people would go to the park and take pictures with him all the time. And I was just like fascinated with him. I followed him on Twitter and was highly active there and loved following along with like the pictures he posts, with his food and what stadiums he's going to, his mini golf, whatever it may be. So I actually reached out to him in the fall of 2018. So about a year and a half after he was, discovered and working at Barstool. And I just messaged him and was like, hey, Frank, like, I'm a big fan. I was wondering if you'd want to have a conversation sometime, like just to introduce myself and, get to know him. Because very much so, like I was graduating college that semester.
Okay.
And I was trying to pursue, a sports media career. And the way to do that is to be reaching out to people at all times, connecting with as many people, as possible, and just, introducing yourself around the industry. And Frank fell into that spectrum for me. I loved following along with him, and we had like probably an hour-long conversation. It was almost like a podcast. And,
Okay.
just was talking to him like pretty much like I do every week, just not scripted
Yeah.
and or no structure, I should say, because we
Gotcha.
do
Okay.
roll in with topics every week.
It
But
would seem tough to script a guy like Frank. I feel like that then you lose the authenticity of what Frank the Tank is.
yeah, that's a good observation, because it is like we have a script every week for each show. I'll write it,
Mhm.
and we have topics and we have segments,
Yeah.
but Frank also, like, how he goes. He likes to he goes off down different rabbit holes, and now we have a couple sponsors, so we do actually have to have, there are things that we do have to follow with
Yeah,
the
you have
ad
to
reads and
structure it to get
whatnot.
the ad reads in and all that.
Yeah, and Frank, but at the same time, yeah, Frank just likes to let it fly, as everyone
Mhm.
knows. But after the conversation I had with Frank, a couple of months went by. He was looking for a podcast host for Allow Me to Be Frank. To that point, Allow Me to Be Frank was, created by Frank and two other kids who did not work for Barstool.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't work for Barstool either, but
Right.
just two kids, I guess, fans of him who also were kind of in the industry as well, or trying to get in the industry. They started a podcast with Frank. They built a little bit of a following, had some guests on. And then I guess they went off and did other things. I believe one of them works at Fantasy Pros, and I don't know what the other kid's doing, but I've spoken to him a few times. And that's when he tweeted out like, "Oh, I'm looking for a podcast host." So I messaged him. We had the prior conversation. He knew
Mhm.
me. We did a test show, me and him, and he did one with Avery, who now is a producer at Barstool. And then we started doing the show together. So this was in April of 2019. So Allow Me to Be Frank was revived by us,
Okay.
because Frank needed a co-host. So yeah, so basically I've been doing it once a week for over 2 years now. I guess around since April 2019 to present. Couple months later, after we resumed things in April of 2019,
Yeah.
Nick Buono, our producer and social media guy, reached out to me, and he was doing some social media stuff for Robbie when they had the WWE podcast at Barstool that went
Mhm.
defunct. And Nick's been great too. Nick's been pivotal to our operation and to our show. He's a very creative guy. Now works with Chaps, doing ZBT. He's their
Oh, okay.
producer as well. He does social media for wrestling, and he does social and produces for us for Allow Me to Be Frank. And him reaching out to me in the beginning of the show was like a godsend, because he's like the maestro. With everything, our graphics, our backgrounds, producing. Because Frank, I'm not sure if you know this, but Frank is not very great with technology.
Right.
So we've had a lot of shows freeze, crash, lose audio,
Gotcha.
whatever it may be. Frank has had tons and tons of problems, and Nick's able to work his magic, whether stitching the show together or editing certain things out. And I have no clue how to do this. I mean, it's something that I, would probably like to learn, but I have no idea. I'm not technical in any which way at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were talking to Joe down at Feltman's, he said that Allow Me to Be Frank was kind of like you guys were doing this as kind of like a tryout to be on Barstool, to come under their umbrella. So especially now you've got like Frank works there. Is Barstool kind of the end goal for you, or to kind of do Mets stuff for them and continue to Allow Me to Be Frank? Like what's the goal for you out of doing Allow Me to Be Frank?
For me personally, like I've always, I grew up in a Mets household, a Mets and New York Giants household in New Jersey. So obviously being on the beat now for the Mets is like a dream come true.
Mhm.
And I do want to be a well-known, reporter in the New York market, and, get TV, radio, whatever it may be around here. Grew up on SNY, WFAN.
Yep.
So stuff like that is kind of the dream too. In addition to being a reporter. But the Allow Me to Be Frank, part of my career, I love it and honestly cherish it. And, it's like a baby almost. Like we did take it over when it, was built up a little bit, but it had been, on pause for a while.
You
But
guys
it's like,
take it to the next level, that where it was before just a normal podcast. Now you guys are marketing it a lot more. You brought on the sponsors. You're going above and beyond for this podcast.
Yeah, well, exactly. While like I'm not really like my goal per se is not really to work for Barstool. Our goal definitely is I don't think there's any secret that, you know, we'd love to be picked up by Barstool, and I think that's a huge goal of ours. And you know, now we're getting the sponsors in place, we're getting our names out there. Frank has been, you know, continuing to grow his audience since he got brought on full time there in the fall. So yeah, I mean, it's great to hear, you know, people listening and that people are fans and kind of just seeing this thing grow from where it was. Because when we started, really for the majority of the time we've done this, we didn't have sponsors. We just did this to do it, you know, to kind of build something.
Yeah.
But it's not like it took a while to kind of get some results out of it. And that's kind of how my career has been in general with everything that I've done is like, you know, sometimes you work for free, you work for barely nothing, but you're building towards something. It's just like you just can't quit, and that's kind of the way that I look at it, at least personally, in both Allow Me to Be Frank and outside of Allow Me to Be Frank in the reporting realm, is just like kind of just being relentless. But yeah, and end goal I guess would be on one half to be like you know, a big reporter in New York sports, and you know, doing also like TV and radio on the side in addition to writing and reporting. And then, yeah, I'd love to, you know, continue to grow, Allow Me to Be Frank, and, you know, get it on the network at Barstool. Cause that's, you know, Frank is very, very much so like a huge star, as I'm sure you know. He has so many fans. Like
Mets games. I mean, every Mets game Frank is at, and he likes and retweets. Everybody posts a picture. Got to meet the legend, Frank the Tank. Like you'll see at least 50 of them pop up on your timeline from Frank retweeting and liking them, of just people they see him around the ballpark. He gets mobbed. He's pretty much a celebrity at Mets games now, which is unreal. It's awesome to see.
The Subway Series too, the first game he went to, the one that got rained out, he was mobbed by Mets and Yankees fans alike with pictures. He said he took probably 80 pictures and like he couldn't walk down the hall for 10 feet before getting mobbed by a million fans. So that's always really cool to hear. I went to Barstool at the Park with him in 2019. And even in Penn Station, like he was getting stopped a lot by people, you know, asking to take pictures with him and stuff, like, cause he's just so recognizable. He's an icon in a way.
Yeah. He's probably, if you look at Barstool, probably one of the 10 or 15 most recognizable people at the company. You'd probably have to put him in the top 10. You'd go Dave, Big Cat, Kevin, and then outside of that, like everybody knows who Frank is. He's on every live stream. He's on literally everything there. And just he's a fan favorite too. Everybody loves him too. There's not really a person that doesn't like him, unless it's Nate. That's about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, besides his arch nemesis Nate, but yeah, Frank's very versatile, and that's you know, part of the reason he's so successful is his versatility, and he basically can be thrown into any situation and you know, like thrive in it. Like you saw, he went on Fox on TV with A-Rod, like in the very, very beginning when he first got discovered. And I'm like wondering, I'm like, how the hell was he able to do that? But
he was like chirping A-Rod too. He was like giving it back to A-Rod a little bit too, which was hilarious.
Yeah, he can really handle pretty much every situation. It's pretty incredible to kind of watch up close and personal and kind of get to talk to him every single week. It's like, in a way, it's like, I mean, it's good for me, like covering the Mets. It's good for me, obviously, when they win, because fans are into it. You know, a lot of readers, whatever, everyone's, you know, very much dialed in. But in the Allow Me to Be Frank sense, when the Mets lose, it's kind of also good in a way, because, you know, everybody loves Frank's rants and freakouts, and that's what you get when the Mets lose and he's in a bad mood. So especially early on in the season, like in April, the Mets had a lot of meltdowns on Wednesdays specifically, and that's when we record. So we got Frank in like some rare form in some of those shows.
The greatest is when he'll throw out like an occasional, because it's always the Lindor hate. He'll throw out Lindor's not that bad, and everybody's like, "Was your account hacked, Frank?" Like that's all the mentions. They don't believe when he says like something positive about the Mets, which I think is the funniest. And he's a Devils and Dolphins fan, which has to just be even more brutal. Yeah. That's just a tough life to live.
Given his age, though, he has seen the Devils win 3 Stanley Cups, and hockey's like, he's a huge hockey fan.
Mhm.
But yeah, he's very much so in the Fleming curse. Like the Mets lost Thomas Japucky yesterday, who's like a minor league pitcher for them. And, their pitching depth is thin in the minor leagues and the majors right now. But like he already was like, are you kidding me? Like the Fleming curse lives on. Like I was not expecting when I posted that story yesterday, I was not expecting, him to be saying that this was part of the Fleming curse. I mean, I understand when like the Nets got knocked out and had all their injuries and, the Mets with all their injuries, but I mean, they've still continued to kill it for the most part. They've been in first place for 9 straight weeks this season. Yeah, like that I understand, but not necessarily like the little things he kind of loves to magnify, but Frank's a very unique cat as everyone knows, and that's what makes him special.
I think the craziest is like the sports encyclopedia he has, and then when he goes on trivia and he spits out an answer. I love watching Nick and KB interacting with him on trivia because Frank will just start shouting out answers like it's nobody's business, and they're like, Frank, please just raise your hand, please, Frank, stop yelling answers out like in the bonus rounds or something. But I mean, they just had the huge first match win in trivia, which was wicked awesome to see.
Yeah, and Frank literally knows probably everything about everything. Like I've never met. He literally his brain is an encyclopedia. He just knows like the most randomest thing. Like that's the thing. Like at least when we first started doing the show together, and it was like there's a big age gap. He's 20. I think he's 20, exactly 20 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 21. But so anyway, there is an age gap, of course. So he'll be like, "Oh, do you know this person or like this from like 1989 in the MLB season?" I'm like, "No, Frank, I have no idea." But it's fun for having him tell me, that stuff that I have learned so much from him, especially about the history of sports or certain things I forgot or just didn't know of because I am, a lot younger than him.
Yeah. So where did you go to college when in college, and where'd you go to study sports, like sports journalism, stuff like that? Like how did you kind of get into your field?
So that's a great question. I definitely have a different path than other people. I went into college. I went to Salisbury University
Mm-hmm.
in Southern Maryland, so right near Ocean City, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I believe I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you're from Mass, aren't you?
I'm a Connecticut guy. I
You're
know
Connecticut. Okay, close then.
Pat stuff. You're a Connecticut fan. We have nothing in Connecticut for pro sports teams other than a minor league baseball team. So we're rooting for all New England teams. At least that's what my dad's doing.
Yeah, no, I know. I know how it goes there. But yeah, I was going to say, I was like, there is a Salisbury, Massachusetts, but I went to the one in Maryland, Salisbury U. That's where Dan Quinn, the former Atlanta Falcons coach, played football. Frank Purdue Chicken. So anyway, yeah. So I went in as an accounting major. I was always obsessed with New York sports growing up. Very passionate, of course, fan base down here in Jersey. And I grew up like an hour train ride outside New York City, in North Jersey. So I went in as an accounting major. Didn't really know, what I wanted to do. Was not that too good of a student at the time. I was young. I was 18, 19 years old. The Mets were in the World Series beginning of my sophomore year of college when I was still that said accounting major. So all I really cared about was kind of hanging out and watching the Mets, watch in the postseason run, watching the Giants on Sundays, whatever, hanging out. I wound up leaving school after that semester. So this was in 2015.
Okay.
So I left school, but I didn't leave, college education. I went to my community college back in Jersey. I came home for a year, went to community for a year. And that's when I switched majors. I went into communications. And at that point I was like, okay, like I know I want to do something in sports. At the time, I didn't really know what. I thought maybe, working for a team like the Giants or the Jets or something like that, which is extremely hard because there's only there's a handful of jobs in the NFL as it is in the entire country. So I kind of grinded, got a little bit of journalism experience, like wrote for the school newspaper, went back to Salisbury, and finished out my last year and a half there and got my undergrad in communications. So I was more focused in PR at the time, but then I also, I did do some journalism classes, some journalism internships. fast forward to the summer of 2018. It was my final summer in college, and I got to work for Intercom, which is now rebranded as Odyssey.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, just as a summer job. And I was working at the one in New York, in Greenwich Village. So they own WFAN. And, I was working in promotions, but I got to go to a couple live remote broadcasts that they did at Giants training camp, actually. So I went with the great Mike Francesa for a day. I went with Boomer and Gio.
Yeah.
Maggie and Chris Carlin. It was a great experience. Like, I was just basically on the set of their broadcast, like working as an extra set of hands, like not doing anything technical, but just like, preparing the players for the interviews, the coaches, talking to them, whatever. It was really easy stuff, and it was awesome. And at that point I was like, okay, how do I make this into a career? So I went back to school, and I had an extra semester to finish up. My class graduated in 2018. I graduated in December of 2018 because I did leave school, and change majors for a brief period of time in between. So at that point, I just started connecting with people as much as possible. That last semester of college, Frank was one of those people. So afterwards, I graduated in December. I had just started writing for, I don't know if you've heard of Metsmerized Online. They're like a huge Mets blog. Started writing for a couple other blogs, for Giants, and, was just building experience, and, didn't have enough experience at that point to get a job in the industry. It's extremely hard, extremely competitive. So what I did was I took a full-time sales job, unrelated industry, pay the bills, save up money to move out, and was doing that, 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, while also doing part-time freelance work, building up reps, building a portfolio, continuing to build connections, had focused on doing some exclusive interviews with players. I interviewed Aaron Judge last year when he was, he was dealing with a rib injury that they didn't know if he was going to be ready when spring training started during the COVID shutdown. And, I was the only one in the industry to get that interview with him. And, it was a huge story because he was like, oh yeah, I'm healthy. I'm ready to go. I'm hitting and running, whatever. Just stuff like that, like broke some news here and there. DJ LeMay
You get to break that story about Judge saying he feels good and he's ready to play.
Yeah. I didn't sleep for 2 days, basically trying to break that. Cause you get so worried. It's so competitive that you get worried that like, oh, shit, what if someone's going to jump me on the report or something like that? But thank God didn't happen. DJ LeMahieu this past winter, his 6-year, $90 million contract with the Yankees. I was the first to report on that.
Nice.
And got the proper credit. So it was all just little things like that, doing interviews, with players, coaches, whoever it may be. And I didn't even have access when until recently. So it was kind of like I wasn't even on the, the fairest of playing fields as opposed to everybody else, but, made myself stick out until finally I quit my latest sales job in the end of March, early April. Said, fuck it. I'm going, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but we can bleep that out if not. But at a certain point, I just, it was 2 years of building up a network and experience and everything, and saw some success. And I said, screw it. I'm going to go for this myself. I'm done, waiting for someone to give me an opportunity or take a chance on me. I'm going to go out and get it. So I quit my sales job in a couple months ago in April, started freelancing, initially, grinding here and there and just kind of continuing to focus on this full time, which is what, that was my ultimate goal. One of my big goals was, when I set out was, how do I do this full time? How does this become my career? And I spent so much time, doing everything else too, like full-time job, pay the bills, whatever, that, it was finally like such a relief to be able to focus on this full time. So I did do the freelance for a little bit, and now I technically am still a freelancer, but I got, the full time, my main gig is the SI gig as a Mets beat reporter launching their site. And that's where I am today, as well as doing the podcast with Frank as well. It took a long time, but it was like kind of a bunch of different things along the way that kind of all blended together and kind of got me to this point. And it's kind of just like, it's been a long journey, but there's a long way still left to go.
Seems like it's working out pretty good. So you had mentioned you interned at WFAN, and you said you wanted to kind of get back into radio. I mean, it's a pretty legendary radio station. You had Francesa there. Francesa now is kind of just a big joke with the prank calls and stuff, which is a bummer to see. But so is that a place you would want to land, like doing radio there, sports talk? Is that what you'd want to get into?
Initially, it was like when I did work there, and I actually interviewed for like a board op job for them, like right out of college, like probably 2 weeks after I graduated college. Didn't
Okay.
get it. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, sports radio, it was like my goal initially, and then I moved to writing and reporting. Right now, I think reporting is probably my niche. Like I feel like I was kind of just like pushed into it by destiny.
Mhm.
That's not to say though, of course, like WFAN is a great station and a powerhouse, of course. Like eventually, like I would love to do some work with them, whether it's reporting or like guest roles or whatever it may be, a contract. I don't really know how it works exactly, but obviously just
Yeah.
looking at some of my peers in the industry who have been around for a long time. Yeah, I mean, somewhere down the road, I would love to work with them again. I do know a good amount of people there still, and admire their work and what they built over there.
Do you follow Funhouse on Twitter? That
Yeah,
account?
of course. Yeah, of course I do. He's
So if,
hilarious.
if you were on the radio, would you be worried that a guy like Funhouse is going to be clipping everything that you do? Because well, I mean, he's still kind of on the Francesa beat, but seems like he's branching out a little bit since Francesa kind of snapped on him a while back, and it has just become not even really taking prank phone calls anymore. So it kind of stinks because he's just doing his radio.com show now. So would you be worried about a guy like Funhouse, or would you just go out there and do your normal radio?
I mean, honestly, Funhouse, like, he gets you a lot of exposure. You
Yeah.
know, obviously, like, it kind of sucks. Like, not everyone can take like being if you're like the butt of the joke or whatever.
Right.
But like at the same time, like he is getting like he got Mike a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
What was it? I think Mike went on like a political rant last year or
It was
something.
something about, I think, Trump during COVID, and
Yeah,
it ended up just like blew up because of Funhouse.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly the stuff that I'm talking about. Like it got like 9 million views or something like that. Was on like CNN,
Mhm.
Fox, whatever it may be. Um, you know, there's a lot of positives to Funhouse
Yeah.
clipping you for sure. Because I mean, like someone like me, like I live in Hoboken, so I don't have my car here, so I rarely am listening to the radio now.
Mhm.
Um, so like yeah, like a lot of this stuff like is not being seen or heard, unless it's being shared on social media. And
Right.
an account like Funhouse that definitely can benefit you a lot if he is clipping your work.
The greatest is when he puts up like the old Mike and the Mad Dog clips, like the
Yeah,
or like when Francesa went on the rant about Harambe, called him a gorilla. Um, there was
yeah,
the Captain Kangaroo one. There's the and my favorite is Francesa's talking about Daredevil, the superhero movie, and Mad Dog asks, he talks about how he's a blind crime fighter, and Mad Dog at the end asks if that was a true story. So I mean, all of those clips are just the greatest little 10-15 second little Twitter clips that you could possibly see. They're hilarious.
yeah. That's it. They really are hysterical. It's funny that like well, you're from Connecticut. I was gonna
Mhm.
say I was like, but I feel like there is like a kind of a national audience, even though this is like in New York. But do you listen to like Boston sports radio ever, or like the Hub?
I listened to EEI a little bit when Kirk
Oh yeah,
Minahan, like the Kirk and Callahan show was on. He has
yeah,
the podcast now at Barstool, so I'm a huge fan of that. But I listen, if I do listen, I listen to the Sports Hub now with Zolak and Bertrand and Felger and Maz usually, but very here and there. Not
Funhouse loves to clip with Felger and Maz.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because Felger's like out of it half the time. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's hilarious. He kind of moved off of Francesa and started doing a little bit of Felger and just a little bit more of random radio guys too now, which is pretty funny seeing that Francesa's not the only boob out there on the radio. That's
Yeah, that's definitely
pretty
for
good.
sure.
So before I let you go, so you're a Giants fan. I'm a huge draft guy, free agency guy when it comes to the NFL. How are you feeling about the Giants season coming up after what they've done in the offseason?
I think this is the most exciting team they've had in quite some time.
Okay.
They spent big, of course. They brought in guys like Kenny Galladay, Adoree Jackson.
Mhm.
They re-signed Leonard Williams after a huge year, drafted
Yep.
Kadarius Toney. I think their last 2 draft classes have been very sound. And not only that, like obviously a lot of eyes are on Daniel Jones this year. Like what he does in year 3, plus if Saquon can come back healthy, that's good, a pivotal part of the Giants and their success this year. They have a really good defense. Like they had the 12th ranked defense despite having holes last year.
And now they're bringing in, like you said, a Dory Jackson's coming in who will be a real solid corner 1 or even a corner 2. So, I mean, like you said, the defense is real good. It's the offense that's a little, and they kind of address those holes.
I think it's possible that they have a top 5 defense this year. And I think the defense will win them a lot of games, but the offense needs to be at least middle of the pack. Jason Garrett's the main concern there with his system. Now he has the weapons that there's no excuse. But at the same time, like Garrett, we saw his system. He just runs a lot of curl and dig routes and, uncreative route designs that guys are on top of each other, not enough spacing, guys not getting open. But now they do have Kenny Golladay who can kind of create his own separation given his size, make the contested catch. Daniel Jones's health is also a big thing too, because his legs, we saw down the stretch, he didn't have his legs because he had the hamstring injury, and without his legs, he's really not very effective.
He's an underrated, like mobile quarterback. Everybody kind of sees him as a goofier Eli, but I mean, when he had the clip against the Eagles, I mean, he fell like 10 yards, 8 yards short, but I mean, he's fast and super agile, which is wicked unexpected. Didn't really see that out of him in college, which is pretty cool to see now in the NFL.
Yeah, in the college he was running for his life at Duke, but he's extremely fast, extremely mobile. But really what it comes down to is him taking the jump. Is the offensive line going to hold up? Because they did get rid of one of their best offensive linemen in Kevin Zeitler. They have a second-year left tackle in Andrew Thomas, who, he improved last year. He started off rocky. He improved. Matt Pert is starting at right tackle this year full time. He showed flashes, but he hasn't played a full season yet.
I love the offensive line with how young they are, because I mean, it could be, you have Pert and Thomas who are same year. They're going to be second-year guys. Lemieux is going to be a second-year guy. Hernandez is going to be one of the older guys on the O-line. And then you have Nick Gates is probably one of my favorite. I'm a Minnesota Viking fan, so he's probably my favorite, like, non-Viking player. It's just awesome seeing him get into, like, Aaron Donald's face, Jalen Smith, just not step down from anybody. He's so fun to watch.
The funny thing is he struggled last year in the beginning until that game against Aaron Donald, when he got in his face and just like got that mean streak going. He was really good after that, because he had never played center before in his career. I don't think at any level. And he looks like, at least based off last year, he looks like he's going to be their center of the future. Another key is the coaching staff too, like Joe Judge and Pat Graham. I think, with those 2 guys, I think this is going to be a playoff team this year, barring any injuries. I think finally, if there's any sport, and I'm sure I mean, you played college football. Coaching matters the most in football. That's what I think. It's important to have, a good coaching staff in football, because the good coaching staffs are the ones that can cover up for the holes. And that's what this staff did last year.
Right.
They take a little and make it a lot. The Giants were one horrible drop by Evan Ingram away from winning the division at 7-9.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones made a great, perfect throw to Ingram, and it hit right off his hands, and they lost that game to the Eagles in their first matchup. Had he held on to that, like most, at least average tight ends in the league would have, they would have been in the playoffs. And I know it was 7-9, and the division stunk. That's the only reason. But the coaching staff did a lot with a little last year, and I think now they have a lot. They have a loaded roster, and I think that they're going to thrive under this coaching staff. So it should be a very fun year. I'm actually very excited to covering them this year. And it should be a lot of fun.
Do you like the Kyle Rudolph pickup to kind of, I think that's more of to Ingram, like pushing him, not even his depth, but just like, hey, we have a guy that is pretty efficient. Like, I mean, he's older, but I mean, he's got good hands, good blocker. Like, if you don't perform, you will not be playing. Do you think it's more of that move or just to add depth?
I think it's a little bit of both. Ingram's in his contract year. Unless he has a remarkable turnaround season this year, cleans up the stupid mistakes, the drops, the fumbles, whatever it may be. He's probably not in the long-term plans of the future with this team. And Kyle Rudolph, I think is also just like to add another weapon to the arsenal and provide insurance should Ingram have another, disappointing season like he did last year. I think Rudolph will fit into the mold, pretty smoothly, honestly. And I think a guy like him will help out Jones, and it'll help out their efficiency in the red zone too with scoring more points. So I think that's like a sneaky underrated move. That might wind up turning out as like one of the better moves of the offseason that no one really expected.
Definitely. Well, Pat, I appreciate you coming on. Where can everybody find you on social media? Plug away the podcast, your socials, everything.
Perfect. Thanks. You can follow me on Twitter at Ragazzo Report. You could also follow me on Instagram at Ragazzo Report. That's Ragazzo. You could report, and then you could check out my work at Frank the Tank Pod. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Frank the Tank Pod, where I co-host a weekly podcast with the great Frank Fleming of Barstool, aka Frank the Tank, and our producer Nick Buono. I also contribute to Inside the Pinstripes, which is the Yankees Sports Illustrated website, with a couple stories a week. And I do run Inside the Mets, which is the New York Mets site for Sports Illustrated and Fan Nation. Check that out if you get the chance, for any Mets fans who are listening. It's where I serve as the daily beat reporter for Sports Illustrated for covering the Mets. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome, Pat. Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of the My Parents Office podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes we're going to be bringing to you guys. Thank you.